So again, if you're working along in class and what you have at the end of class is not something you're happy with, that's okay. Okay. Keep in mind that this is not a like this is about you learning what not to do, and sometimes that just requires you to mess it up, right? Sometimes your first time modeling a coffee cup, that coffee cup ends up as a disaster, right? And the things you learn by making that disaster help make that second coffee cup even better, right? So that's kind of going to be the the thing to consider as we go through the rest of this class, and really in a lot of your future classes. Sometimes you'll be working through something in class, and what you're getting is not perfect, but you learn a lot in the process of messing those things up, right? So again, you can follow along with me. What we're going to do today, I'm going to cover two or three, depending on how far we get, really kind of complicated things. Okay. The first one I'm going to cover is the dreaded UV discussion that I've been promising for so long, because I think the cereal box is a great place to start on that, right? Which basically is how we are going to lay out our model in order to make it something we can texture easily, right? Or more easily, I guess. And then the second thing we're going to try to get through today is pouring some cereal out of this box. Now, that is going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be like crash and burn disaster. Like this is a really challenging process, right? And so like hopefully everything will go smoothly, everything you click is working well. And if that happens and we get to the end of that, then that was a success. Like that's happened a few times in classes. Sometimes we have to keep doubling back and going over the process again so it's clear to everybody. But if we manage to get through the cereal pouring out of the box, I'm going to show you how to make steam come out of the coffee cup. Okay? Now, all of those are parts of the project, so whatever we don't get to today, we will get to on Monday. And of course, Friday is more time for you to be working on this. I'll be in the building. I know that there's a few meetings scheduled. Again, if I'm not up here in class during class time, come check downstairs. I get a lot of students from other classes, from this class, whatever, stopping by my office needing like one-on-one help. And sometimes I just don't make it up to the room. I am almost always here during our class time on Friday. I just may not be in this room. So if for some reason I'm not here, come check on me downstairs in my office, and I may just be down there helping another student. So I think that this is a good point to get. If we can get through the cereal box or the cereal pouring part, I think we're in good shape. So right now I have my coffee cup, I have my cereal box. This is a consistent issue that you will be dealing with throughout a lot of your modeling career, which is scale, right? And although I love coffee, that one's probably a little too big, right? So I'm going to go ahead and scale my coffee cup down to something more equitable or something more appropriate. And I'm going to go ahead and scale up my cereal box and try to get a reasonable scale for me to be working in. But it brings up the question of scale. Like, how big is that cereal box? Like, is that the size of a box of raisins? Or is that the size of a semi-truck? Like, what is a unit of measure in Maya? Any ideas?
I guess it's just whatever you make it to be. It's kind of relative.
It can be, but there are certain things that are very dependent on scale, right? Like physics. Physics, for example, gravity is what 9.8 is 9.8 meters. Is it meters per second squared? Yeah, I think it is, right? Right. And so, if that is the size of a semi truck, the distance that travels per second squared is going to look different, right? So we need to think about scale. I'll be honest though, like the Maya gets a little weird in that depending on what you're doing, it looks at scale differently. In general, one of those little squares on our grid is 1 Maya unit, which is meaningless unless we equate it to something else, right? And 1 Maya unit by default is a centimeter. And since we're in America, we're all going centimeter. I'm gonna have to Google that one, right? No, you know, we got about, was it 2.5 centimeters in an inch, right? So is that correct? So that'll give you an idea of how big something is. Once we start dealing in physics, sometimes different physics engines calculate a Maya unit differently. And so there's ways we can fudge this, and I'm not going to hold you too much to this right now. I would much rather you focus on making something look right than be technically accurate in terms of scale. If the coffee cup to cereal box proportions are close enough that it looks correct, I'm more concerned with aesthetic at this point. So, but this is good information to know that 1 unit is a centimeter, and we can change that. We can go into the settings and we can tell Maya, no, we want each of these units to represent a meter instead. And that can start getting complicated later on because you're going to be sending some files from Maya to other software packages, right? Like if you're wanting to do game design, you're going to be sending objects from Maya into Unreal, and Unreal has a set of units in there that it also considers centimeters, right? So if you change your units to meters in here and try to send something to Unreal, then your character may end up being the size of a skyscraper, right? Or the size of an ant, right? And so we really have to kind of think of scale in there. As of now, just know it's a worry you're going to have in the future, but by the time you get to that point, all of these other things you're worrying about right now are not going to be as stressful, and you can focus on the scale part of it later. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of get this proportional. I'm also going to go ahead and make me a table. Your table does not count as one of the main object pieces because I'm pretty much done modeling my table, right? That was a really simple like model. If you're wanting to do some more detailed stuff to it, we could always grab the edges around here and do like a bevel or something like that to get a little rounded corner on there or something like that, right? So there's lots of different modeling tools we can play around with that. But I just wanted to get myself some sort of tabletop for my breakfast scene. I'm going to go ahead and scale down my coffee cup, make it kind of size appropriate. I don't know. How does that feel? Huh? Little on the small side? I like where your head's at. More coffee, please. There we go. There we go. Okay. So the other thing I'm going to need for this scene is I'm going to need some form of bowl, and I'm going to need some sort of cereal piece, right? So we can model those here in just a second. But first, I want to sort of talk about getting some textures on this thing, right? We already have seen how to add materials, right? Like I can go in here, I can select the wood, right click, assign new material. And that's going to bring up this thing. I know that I'm going to be rendering in Arnold because Arnold looks best. So I'm going to go to these Arnold shaders. I almost always do AI standard surface. And just by doing that, I get a pretty decent material on here that I can sort of turn up and down that gloss. I can also sort of make this a wood color if I want to. So we can just play around with this. So we kind of understand how the materials work. And I've even shown you in the past how to add a texture on an object, right? So just a quick example of this. I think I've shown you this already. cgtextures.com, I think it is. Which I think actually ends up just going to, maybe it's just textures.com now. Or maybe I just need to learn how to spell. Yeah, so it just goes to textures.com. You can sign up for a free account, and there's just a lot of good material in here. So I could download some wood. So I think I've already got mine logged in. There we go. And so we can find materials, and we put these in our source images, and we can map those onto the table, right? So I could go to, I'm going to get me some wood here. So let's go to wood. Maybe something kind of like fine wood. This is more like something that has like a varnish on it or something. And let's say, so what's a good texture material? Maybe that. That looks nice. All right. Now, there's a handful of different options for this, but one of them is this. The free option is this one. Let me see if there's something else that's a little bigger here for free. Yeah, it's like they're giving away the small ones for free and wanting you to pay for the big ones. So that'll work. 0 credits. I'm going to go ahead and put this in my breakfast source images scene. Hit save. And so, as we've seen, what I can do now is instead of just picking a color, I can click on this little checkerboard out here. Right? And that will bring up this. And I can choose File. And it'll bring up this little file picker. And then I can go find that image I just downloaded. Right? So right now I have this image and I have my white coffee cup. If I choose my wood material, then I get this wood on here. And that looks terrible. Right? Let me go ahead and put me a sky dome light in here and we can just get a render. Let's see what we're getting out of that. So a little too low res for that. So maybe I would find a different one on here. And so that's one of the reasons that this is beneficial. Now, there's actually a lot of free resources as well. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. There's actually a lot of other ways you can get good textures simply because you also have access to a camera, right? So we can go out and, okay, so this one's a little bit bigger and I can get it for free. Let's try that one. Sure. Of course, once that one's done, I can go back here to this and find that new texture I just got. So I think it's that one. Is this one seamless? Actually, this may be better. I don't know. Yeah, maybe that's looking better. So I'm able to get textures on there, but this tabletop is actually pretty easy. Right? It's just sort of a flat object. Like getting the texture to line up on that isn't as challenging as like, how do I get my texture to wrap around a coffee cup, right? How many of you have ever wrapped Christmas presents or birthday presents or something like that, right? So let's say you buy somebody something in a box, I don't know, a Blu-ray or maybe it's a puzzle or something like that. That's not too hard to wrap, right? It's got these flat surfaces. You wrap the edges around it. Has anybody ever tried wrapping something that is a more irregular shape? Let's say like a teddy bear. Have you ever tried to wrap a teddy bear? You give up and just put it in a bag. How about a basketball? Anybody wrap a basketball? So we just kind of intuitively know why that's difficult, right? Like it is not in a regular shape that makes it easy to wrap a flat piece of paper around it, right? And so that's what we're actually dealing with UVs here. Okay, so UVs are a little bit hard for people to grasp in terms of concept. Right? A UV is just another coordinate system for our 3D objects, right? So we have X, Y, Z already, right? And that's forward, back, up and down, left, right, right? That's X, Y, Z axes. Well, U and V are these axes that exist in sort of this theoretical space, right? It's not this 3D world space where we're moving things around here. It's the space where we are going to line up our objects with a texture, right? So I could let me find something a little more notable here. How about Paisley? So I'm just going to get a Paisley pattern here, not Brad Paisley. Image. There we go. I'm just going to download this as an example to show you. Save image as JFIF. What is that? That one may not work as well. Let's see. GIF. There we go. And so if I tried to wrap our Paisley pattern around this coffee cup, let's create a new material. I hate that it creates everything on the other screen. Standard surface, color, file, and I'm just going to add Paisley pattern. We get that, right? Now there's just a lot messed up with this. And if I go look at the actual image for that, sorry, 1 second. You're going to see that that's not how that's supposed to look, right? This is what we should be getting on that coffee cup. And this is what we are getting, right? And so really this is how you have to think about it. That 2D texture, right, it exists in 2D space. It's only got width and height, right? It doesn't have depth. I can't pick up one of those Paisley patterns and see what's behind it. It's completely flat. And I am trying to tell Maya, wrap that around this coffee cup. But I've given it no instructions whatsoever on how to wrap it around that coffee cup. Maya by default tries to have some set of instructions, but those set of instructions are just the UV coordinates of this, right? So let's look at what that means. This is made up of a whole bunch of different vertices, right? All these vertices here. For each of those vertices, we have a UV that coincides with it, right? So if I go to Windows, Modeling Editor, and UV Editor, we're going to see this. Okay, and this is kind of hard to make out as it is right now. If I uncheck this button here, you won't see the image anymore. This is how Maya thinks of my coffee cup if it were flattened out. Okay? So all of that surface area that I have that makes up my coffee cup, Maya's like, we have to lay that out flat so we know how to wrap this texture around it. Yes?
So how'd you find that again?
It's Windows, and then Modeling Editors, and then UV Editor.
Gotcha.
So, here's some interesting stuff to notice, right? All of this actually coincides with the 3D mesh we've been working on all this time, right? This is the top of my, or the bottom of my cup, right? This little ring here, and that makes sense. You remember those parts, right? This is the inside of my cup, right? And if I were to, I can kind of mount this off to the side here so you can see it. Oh wow, that was great. There we go. And if I were to go in here and select some of these faces, right, you'll see that, right? That triangle there coincides with that triangle, right? Sorry, I know this is, I'm trying to get enough screen real estate here where you can kind of see what's going on. There we go. So I can select all of these, and we can see that they all, like, those faces here in 3D space have been sort of flattened out. Now, here's the interesting thing. Like, all of this stuff here, all this boxy area, that's just the front and side of my coffee cup, right? Like, you can see that selecting them there. all of this stuff on the inside, it's actually completely flattened out somewhere on this edge. Right? You can kind of see that all of those are overlapping each other there. And I think most interestingly, that little clump of stuff right in there, that's my handle to my coffee cup. All of that is just sort of smashed in there, right? And so no wonder this texture isn't wrapping around it in any way that makes sense, right? To understand UVs, you kind of, the best examples or the best analogies are a little morbid sometimes. I always use the Christmas present analogy. But actually, it's easier to think of this in the reverse way. Instead of us trying to wrap a texture around the object, what we're really trying to do is take our 3D object and flatten it out so it will lay down and coincide with a 2D object, right? We're trying to take our 3D object in XYZ space and turn that into UV space, like UV coordinates. And an example of that is like a skin, right? Like a pelt or something like that. I don't know if any of you hunt or have family members who hunt, but if they kill a deer or something like that, right, they skin that deer. And there's a very specific way that hunters learn how to, cut in order to pretty much take the skin all off in one piece, right? And that's where, like pelts for beaver pelts, whatever, any sort of hunting that is required to get that pelt off. Like there's just a very strategic way you can slice that up and lay that skin out flat, right? That's kind of what we're doing here to our coffee cup. We need to take our coffee cup and lay it out in a way that it unfolds cleanly, and then we could put whatever texture we want to on it, right? The same with our cereal box. Right now our cereal box is going to probably work a little bit better than our coffee cup does, but it's still going to be pretty ugly, right? So I'll show you some tools for that. If we're in the modeling section, there's this UV section right here. This is also, you can find the UV editor here as well. But you'll notice down here we have a couple of different options, right? There's automatic, best plane, camera-based, contour stretch, cylindrical, planar, spherical. And what this is going to do is it's going to take our model or take whatever faces we have selected, and it's going to rearrange them in UV space, not in 3D space, in UV space in a way that it would make more sense to apply to a texture, right? So again, if I were to turn this on where you can see it, right? This is how it's laying out right now. And over here, you'll be able to see, like, this is how the texture is applying to it. If I select my object and go to UVs and maybe do planar mapping, look what we get. So basically what it does is it takes, I don't know if you can kind of see this, there's like a plane that it projects the entire texture onto the model from one axis, right? And so from this angle right here, it looks pretty good, right? But then when I go to like the side angle, you're seeing we're getting this stretching happening, right? So you can kind of see what we're getting there. And so that's one method, but it just doesn't solve all of our problems, right? I can select this object and I could do cylindrical mapping. That seems like it would be closer. And what that's going to do is it's going to wrap a cylinder all the way around our object. And that again is closer, but we're getting some like weird stretching on the side here, a little bit up here, right? And then the bottom of that coffee cup makes no sense at all, right? And really all this is doing is it's taking all of those faces and trying to lay them out in some way that they coincide with that flat texture better, right? So the reason that you will hear more people complaining about UVs is there's just not a one-button solution. For some things, there's a couple button clicks that will get you close, and if it's simple enough of an object, close is enough, right? But there's nothing that's really going to just solve all of your problems. It takes some thinking, right? And I think that that's kind of frustrating because you've already spent all this time modeling, and you're like, I just want the texture to work on it, right? But there's not really an answer for that. So let me show you a few tools that are handy and will at least get you a start, right? One of them is called automatic mapping. And as automatic as that sounds, it doesn't always fix all of your project or problems. What we'll do is if I go to UV automatic, what it's going to do is it's going to do that planar mapping, but it's going to do it from all 6 directions. Right? And so you'll see that what I get is it's projecting downward, upward, left, right, front, and back, right? And if the faces on that model are kind of aiming toward that plane, it will extract those out into its own UV island and sort of separate those. And so for some stuff, like our cereal box, that might work pretty well, right? For like a human face, it maybe won't, because like maybe our nose will be, this, but then the side of our nose will be from this angle. And so like it's all going to be broken up into pieces. And in a texture, you may see those seams. So you see how we got these lines that are kind of breaking it up over here. And you can just see sort of where those seams are that's sort of messing up the texture. Right? However, for our cereal box, this may work great, right? Because right now, that's what our cereal box's UVs look like. And I may be able to just do the automatic mapping on that and get something okay. So we'll come back to that in a second. I want to show you that even after we've extracted it like this, that doesn't mean we have to be finished with this. Sometimes it's kind of hard to see in here. So one of the things we can do is, let me pull this out here so we can see it a little bit better. Under View, I can click Shaded. So what that does is it sort of shades my mesh here so I can see it a little bit better. Inside my UVs, I can edit all of the, or inside my UV editors, I can edit all of these UVs, right? I can go to UV, and let's grab one I can see here. Maybe this one. Where is it at? There it is. So it's this UV right here. And you'll see that if I move this around in UV space, it changes what it's pointing at, right? Like if I want this point to kind of line up more with that center of that circle, I can adjust it to do that. And I can do this with whole sections of my UVs. Slide those up and down. Or entire islands or separate shells here, right? So if I right click, I can go to UV shell and I can select that entire shell and I can move it somewhere else, right? I could move it up there. Right, so this allows us to kind of rework this layout. I can also start stitching these shells back together, right? So if I go to Edge and I click, let's try this one. I click these edges here. Right? You'll notice that as I select them, these edges down here are being selected as well. Right? And that's because up here on our model, it sliced it there, but they still share an edge, right? Those two are actually still part of the same 3D mesh. So once I have those selected, I can actually weld those back together. So we have these cut and sew tools down the side here. I can hit sew, and watch what happens. Well, it does that. That's not the best in the world. There should be a move and sew. Where is that at? Yeah, stitch together right here. And what that's going to do is move that entire piece down here. Right? And I can continue to do that. Like if I wanted to select all of these pieces like this and say stitch together, it's going to start moving all of these pieces into one big unit here, right? And when I've stitched those together, then I'm going to have a cleaner set of UVs where we can't see the seams anymore, right? So we still have that seam. If I say stitch together, and now I just have one big piece, and the only real seam is right there. Now let's say I would rather have that seam right here. I can do the same thing with cut. And I can go through and cut these edges and hit cut. And you'll see that what happens is this is now its own own separate UV shell, right? And if I select these edges right here, I can stitch that back together. Actually, I can kind of do it like this. Stitch together, right? And so that allowed me to pretty much fix that entire set of UVs around that coffee cup, right? Now there's still stuff that's broken up, like all of the little pieces of my handle, the inside of it. But this is kind of meticulous, right? And it requires you to think in kind of two different directions. It requires you to think about the model and how you could unfold it so it works better with a texture. And it requires you to think about the texture map and how it should be wrapped around the model. Because there's two different workflows for this. Let's say I have a brick texture that already exists. I just need to unwrap my model so it lays out in a way that the brick texture makes sense on it. Then I'm kind of working backwards. I'm unfolding my model or unwrapping my model to line up with my texture. But let's say I don't have a texture. Like I don't currently have a texture for my cereal box, right? I can unwrap this object in a way that allows me to create a texture that makes sense for it, right? And then I can take that information into Photoshop and I can pretty much draw whatever texturing I want for it. So I'm going to show you that kind of quickly here. Again, I'm recording this as a video, so you can always go back and kind of watch it slowly, right? But I'm going to quickly unwrap my cereal box. I know I'm not finished with the coffee cup in any way, but this is just kind of to show you as an example. I'm going to unwrap my cereal box in a way that lets us understand what parts are what, so I can take that into Photoshop and create whatever texture I want to inside of Photoshop. Now, how many of you are relatively comfortable in Photoshop? Okay. How many of you have never opened Photoshop? Okay, if you haven't, it's all right. I intentionally made this project a little open-ended to where you don't have to do a ton of Photoshop work. You can probably use, you can go to Kroger today and take a picture of your, honeycombs or whatever cereal still exists, and use that as your textures. You still need to do a little bit of Photoshop work, but I can work with you on that. But what I want is I want to be able to take something into Photoshop to where I know how that thing is laid out, so I can just create a texture for it, right? So I'm going to try doing an automatic mapping on my box. Now, before I do that, I want you to recognize I've already scaled my box, right? Which means if I just did an automatic mapping on it right now, it's going to project all of those shapes as if they're still a square, right? Because I originally made this as a cube, right, where all the sides were the same length. And it's still thinking of it like that, right? But it's not like that anymore. We've completely reshaped this entire model. So that's one of the reasons that we want to freeze our transformations and delete history. I'm going to do this before I've rotated my model in any way. I don't want to do this while the model is like this, because it's really going to depend on the XYZ coordinates for this to work right. So I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History, and then I'm going to go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. And you'll see when I did that, it wiped all of these values out, and now it thinks of my model as being 1 unit high, 1 unit deep, blah, 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 right? So now when I select my box, Object Mode, and go to UV Automatic, it kind of breaks it up in a way that makes sense, right? Now at least it looks closer to an actual box, right? And I can start stitching these pieces back together pretty quickly, right? So I can go in here and realize that this is the top flap, and I can select stuff in here to see this, right? I could grab this edge here, right? And stitch together. UV shell. I'm just going to kind of move these off to the side so I can so I can look at them. I'm going to stitch this edge together. All right. And okay, so now we got pretty much the entire outside of our box. All right, is that the outside? Yeah. I don't really have that little flap up there, so I probably should fix that. Let's do edge, that, stitch together, right? So that's my entire box. If I grab this piece here, that's probably the bottom of my box. There we go. Now, I want you to notice that this piece right here looks like what you would have if you were to actually go cut your cereal box up, right? If you tried to cut it to like fold it out so you could draw on it or something like that, that's the shape that you would have, right? And so if we lay it out like this is pretty easy to figure out what's supposed to be what, right? These little things up here are the flaps. This is the top flap. This is the front. Maybe this is the back. This is the bottom, right? All of these other elements over here are the inside or like the top little flaps, right? And I can stitch those together too if I wanted to, but those are going to be inside the box. So what I'm going to actually do is instead, I'm going to kind of put all of these together right here and scale those down, because since they're inside the box, they don't really have to have as much information to communicate what's going on the texture, right? The outside of the box is the stuff that's going to have more information, like cartoon characters or whatever, right? So I could do something like this. And what I'm trying to do is lay out all of these shapes into this one-to-one corner here. And once I have that, if I click this, you'll see I'm kind of getting this checkerboard pattern that wraps around there. You'll see it lays out pretty well, right? We can see how all of that texture would line up on this object. Okay. Now here's where this actually gets fun for those of you who like anything 2D. If you like illustrating, if you like drawing, whatever. I can take this into Photoshop now, and you can just go nuts on it. And then you can bring that back in as your texture. So let me show you how to do that. Inside of our UV editor here, we're going to go to Tools. Wait, they always move this on me. Sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. It's under Images, or Image, and UV Snapshot. This usually works best if I have the object selected, not the faces, right? So when I do UV Snapshot, it's going to bring this up. This is like where it's going to save an image for me to take into Photoshop and draw on, right? So if I want to make a few changes to this. I don't want a Maya IFF file. I'm going to go with a PNG. I'll call this my CerealUV, right? And you can change the edge color as well. Maybe I'll make mine red so they're easier to see, right? And whenever we're done with all that, I'm just going to hit Apply and Close. Now, if I go to my breakfast folder under my images, you'll see now I have this createuv.png. And it's kind of hard to see in there because it's got the black as the alpha. But a PNG means there's transparency in there. So everywhere you see black, that's actually transparent. And that means I can use this as a template in any illustration program I want to create my texture for my cereal box. Right? So let's try opening this in Photoshop. I'm going to right click.
I'm sorry, how did you make the UV PNG?
I'll do it one more time. So select your object, right? And then image, and this is in the UV editor, image and UV snapshot. And then I just set that to PNG. I changed my color to red, but you can do whatever you want to. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Photoshop as its own program here. Sorry, it's opening it on the other screen. So if I just go to File, Open, go to my desktop and open up that create Serial UV PNG. So it looks like there's not a lot there. It's kind of hard to see because those lines are thin, right? I think we can actually make those thicker when we export. Let me see. I know there's a way, but I'm not going to worry too much about this. But what I usually do is instead of worrying about that, I just duplicate this layer a few times. Right click, duplicate layer, duplicate layer. And then if I hit Control E, it'll flatten that down. Now if I make a new layer and just sort of flood a solid color in there, underneath it, you can see our UV lines now, right? Now, what I have is two layers. I have this white background layer, and that's mainly just so I can see the red layer. And then I have this lines layer, right? Now, pretty much anything that I do in between there will show up underneath the lines, but above the background, right? So let's say I wanted my cereal box to be like the frog one, Honey Smacks, right? I can just flood this entire thing as green. Now this is the inside of my box. So maybe I go to textures.com. Let's look up cardboard, right? There we go. So we're getting some cardboard for this interior here now. Dude, that stuff looks rough. Let's try that one. That looks like the inside of a cereal box, right? So, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. That's more of like a regular box. Let's see what else we got. Maybe something like that. Like, dude, I don't know if I want to eat that box of cereal. There we go. Maybe that. We can always do some adjustments here. Save. So now that I have that, I can drag that into Photoshop as well, right? And I can make that the sort of inside part of my cereal box right here. Alt. And for here, I could do like cereal. Let's give it a color. Sorry. Cereal. You should do a better job than me. I'm just.
A better job than you, Greg? Is that even possible?
See, it's a frog. He's got legs for jumping. Yay. Sorry. So whatever. The thing you need to remember here, though, is we need to hide the lines before we export this. So let's say this is our cereal, right? File, save as. And I'm going to go ahead and save this as a PSD just so I can come back with all the layers as well. Actually, I need to save this in my source images, though. Save as breakfast source images. So I'll go ahead and save that as Serial UV. But I'm also going to save it as either a PNG file or a JPEG file or something like that. So we'll call this one Serial Color because we're going to map this into the color map. And now when I'm back in Maya, I can apply a new material to this. Assign new material. All right. And then on that material, I can go into my color, find my color channel, file, and under file, I can bring in my cereal color, see it there, and it's all going to line up on my cereal box. Okay? Please spend more time on your texturing than I just did. That was me just cranking something out just so you can see this as an example, right? But the cool thing is, all I have to do is go back to that Photoshop file, make any changes I want to, and save over top of that CerealUV or that Cereal color file, and it will update in Maya. So I can just keep going in there and changing that texture over and over and over again, and I can update my texture here in Maya. Okay? So you can use photos of things like you may have a cereal box at home that you want to use. You could take that cereal box, you could cut it up and scan it in, and you could take that into Photoshop to make your cereal box, right? Let's say you have a picture. Let's say you have some bacon that you're putting in your breakfast scene, right? You could cook some bacon, and you could lay that down on a table on a napkin, and take a picture of that with your phone, and use that to create your texture inside of Photoshop for your bacon. You can do anything you want to, or you can just like go nuts and paint all of this digitally inside of Photoshop or whatever painting software you want, right? There's a couple of other texturing options, and I am reluctant to get too heavily into those. But there's a program that should be on all of these computers called Substance Painter. And Substance Painter is a way that you can paint on your objects in 3D, right? So you can kind of go in there, tumble the objects around, paint on them, throw a material on them, change the glossiness of that material, and you can export out your maps. So I am more than happy to encourage you to work on that, but only if you're already feeling a little comfortable in doing some texturing in UVs. Even with that, you still have to do your UV unwrapping to be able to create a texture that means anything to the model, right? Because really what we're doing with UVs is figuring out how that texture should wrap around our model. Right? Okay. How you feeling about this? Yeah? So I will tell you that there are a couple of elements in 3D work that make people make that noise a lot, right? And UVs are one of them. Like they have gotten easier. They are not easy, right? They require a little bit of work, but doing good UVs means you can do some awesome texturing on these things. And so the texturing work is really what makes it pulls it all together, right? And so the thing that I always use the comparison of doing dishes, right? I hate doing dishes, but I love eating. And I just recognize that, those two things have to go hand in hand. I have to do the dishes if I'm going to eat like a giant delicious meal, right? Either that or I throw my plates away, and that just gets expensive. So this analogy is falling apart. So it's one of those things that, yeah, it's a little frustrating, and you kind of just have to pull off that Band-Aid and do it anyway, because it's hard to get really nice looking texturing if you don't. Now there are some things that don't really need you to worry. You don't really need to worry about the UVs that much, right? Like let's say you're just going to have something that's a completely solid color. I wouldn't even worry about it. I would just apply a nice material to it, right? But if it's a solid color and has a little bit of like a texture to it, then you're going to have to unwrap it, or that texture is just not going to wrap around it very well. So an example of that is this wall, right? It looks like it's a solid color, but if you get close, it's got a little bit of like dents and ripples in it. And so we can create those dents and ripples pretty easily. So maybe what you would do is you just do an automatic mapping because it's not got so much detail that you would notice a seam, right? But if you were going to try to do like the pattern on my shirt, or the pattern on your shirt, like all of that stuff is going to be very noticeable if there's a break in that texture, right? And so you kind of have to weigh the costs and benefits of how much you invest in the UV mapping. Again, just try it. Like what I would do is try to get excited about what textures you could make. Like maybe you have your favorite cereal. Maybe you want to show one of your own characters on this cereal box, right? And the fact that you would get to do that, the fact that you get to make that, hopefully will maybe get you excited enough to fight through the UVs in order to achieve that, right? It gets easier. It just becomes kind of like more of a chore, not this like thing that's hard to wrap your brain around. No pun intended. So I'm going to stop there with the UVs and sort of ask questions, comments, anything. Yes.
That's a personal comment.
Okay. Let's look at it real quick.
Yeah. I understand all the UV stuff for the most part. I just can't get textures to actually show up.
Oh, press 6. Yeah. So that's a good reminder though. Remember that Maya doesn't always show texture maps by default. Sometimes you have this, right? So 4 is wireframe, 5 is shaded, 6 is going to show your textures, and then 7 is going to show any lighting information that you may have in the scene, right? So if you're still seeing this, even though you've applied textures to it, just try hitting 6 and see if that brings them up. Also, set your project before you open your scene next time you sit down, or Maya may not be able to find all of these textures we're creating, right? So that is one of the reasons well, that'll be an interesting part of the video. Set that back up there. Sorry. So yeah, set your project, because you'll notice that over here in the file, look where mine is looking for that image, right? Our serial color. It's looking at source images / serialcolor.png, right? It doesn't say C:desktop / breakfast / source images. It just says source images, right? That means it's only looking locally. It's only looking within your whatever project you have set, right? So if you haven't set your projects, it's looking in your documents folder, and you may have your texture on your desktop, right? Or maybe you have it on your jump drive. So it doesn't know where to find it until you set your project. So that's one of the reasons it's really important to do that. Okay, Cereal. Let's go ahead and pull all this stuff out. There we go. All right, I'm going to save my beautiful scene. File, increment, and save. Because we're going to start on some stuff that's a little more difficult, or a little more. It's a little different, right? So I'll still be working in this scene, but I'm going to open up a fresh Maya scene just so we can play with some stuff. This is something that most people by default really kind of enjoy this. And it's kind of this is where you realize that Maya is nothing more than a really complicated version of Minecraft. You can make anything you want to in it, and it actually becomes a very fun software to play in. So I'm just going to go and open up a duplicate version of Maya so I can show you some stuff. There we go. Come on. There we go.
That's a late night snack at Grandma's. That's the scene. So I think my grandma up there is. Of course, my grandma will make sandwiches. Right there, right there.
So I just made a couple of simple objects here. Right? I've made a plane, I've made a sphere, and I've made another plane, and I put that other plane kind of higher, right? And in fact, this top plane, I'm going to make it just a little more dense. Right now, it is 10 by 10. I'm going to go ahead and make it like, let's do 20 by 20, right? Okay. so I'm getting ready to open the door into a completely different category of stuff than what we've worked with before. In the past, whenever we needed something to move, the method in which we made it move, like animated wise, has been keyframes, right? You had that arrow that you guided to that maze, right? You started it on one spot, you hit S to set a keyframe, you moved your timeline, you moved your arrow, you hit S again, and that set a keyframe. That's how you did the bouncing ball. That's how you did the bottle. All of these things have really just been move it, set a keyframe, move it, set a keyframe, right? And that works really well when there's a structure or something that is contained enough to where we can manipulate it and set keyframes on it, right? But think of something like water. Like, how do I keyframe water? Like, if I just move water, like that doesn't make sense, right? With an engine, right? And I mean, we can look at a lot of different things like this. Fabric. What about explosions? How do you keyframe smoke? How do you keyframe, like all of these different things are systems that are too complicated for us to be able to manually manipulate all of the elements in it, right? Avengers 7 or whatever's coming out, 4, I guess. Is it 4? Wherever we're at. I guarantee you some stuff's going to explode in that movie, right? And that means like rubble and debris is going to fly everywhere. In some building, there's like, the Hulk's going to smash through it, and because that's what Hulk does, he smashes. And chunks are going to go everywhere, right? And there's not just like a million animators setting a million keyframes on every pebble that goes flying through the scene. That whole category of animation is called simulation or effects, depending on which part of it you're talking about, right? And it can get really fun because I can just hit a couple of buttons here and it's going to start working, right? Unfortunately, making it do exactly what I want it to do is the harder part, right? So let's go ahead and, I'm going to go ahead and change this object's color just so you can see it a little bit better. Assign a new material. Go ahead and make this blue. That's good, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this up a little bit. And I'm going to go to the Effects tab. Now, there's a whole bunch of different types of effects that we can use in Maya. One of them, you'll see a lot of things in here that have the letter N in front of it, like the lowercase n. There's N particles, there's N cloth, N hair, N constraint, N cache. Anybody have any idea what that N stands for? Nerves. That was a good guess, though. Very good guess. Actually, it stands for nucleus. And so nucleus is Maya's like overall default physics engine, right? And so it's going to simulate physics reactions, right? So do we want like some cloth in this scene? We want some fabric to fall on top of this thing. It will use nucleus. So it's nucleus cloth is what it's using. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this blue piece of fabric, or this blue plane into a piece of fabric, right? So you can follow along with this if you'd like. All I got to do is go to N cloth and say create N cloth. And when I hit play, it's going to fall. Yay, just like a piece of cloth, right? Not very much going on there because there's nothing for it to interact with. Something I'd also want to do is I right click on my timeline and under my playback speed, whenever I'm doing simulations, I always do play every frame max real time, right? And so that means it's going to simulate every frame of the animation and not skip any of them. But the fastest it will play it is at real time, right? And so if I hit play, again, it's just falling through all of those things because none of those things are actually, like it doesn't even notice them. They're not nucleus objects. They're just spheres, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it that no, I want it to collide with both this sphere and this plane, right? So I'll select one and I'll say N cloth, create passive collider. I'll do the same with the floor, end cloth, create passive collider. And now when I hit play, we're going to get actual fabric, right? Or at least seemingly. I can lower this down a little bit and get a bit more like that. Now, this is simulating with as if it's like pretty rigid fabric, but it's still working, right? Couple of things we could do to like change this. Like I can change the start point of this. I could raise this up in the air, rotate it like this a little bit, the sphere over, and we're going to get a completely different simulation. That's interesting. That's funny. Let's try moving that just a little bit more like that. See what we get. And I could also change the objects that it runs into, this floor. All right, I get it. Let's make it bigger. There we go.
Too quick, you can't stop it.
Always gonna do it, right? So I mean, there's a lot of different things we can do. So this is like this to me is where Maya gets pretty fun. Right? Like I can just tinker around with this all day long and just change this simulation, and I'll always get a different solution, right? And, oh yeah. So this is like, and this is just fabric. Right? Now I want to show you how this can get really fun. Is the fact that I can change parameters about all of these things, right? So a couple of things I can do. Over here, you'll see this nucleus node. This is where I can increase gravity. So you'll notice that gravity right now is 9.8. I can change that to 1,000. Or I could just move that decimal place a little bit and make this make gravity a little stronger. And what that's going to look like is like everything is heavier. Gravity's pulling on it a little harder, but it also looks like it falls faster, right? So that's a way we can kind of fudge our simulation of like scale, right? Now this actually looks like a smaller piece of fabric falling than a giant sheet, right? So if I delete that again and put it at 0.98, like this moves a lot slower as if it's bigger and has more mass, right? Other things I can change is each of these objects have parameters. So for example, that stuff's sliding all over everything. Well, I can select my floor and increase the friction, right? And it's not going to be quite as slippery on the floor now. So I say. I guess this thing is still slippery, right? I can also like make this increase the friction on that. Let's see, maybe the stickiness is what I need to do. Yeah, turn up the stickiness, and it's going to stick to it a little bit more, right? But here's where it gets really, like, to me, kind of fun. Is when I select the actual cloth object, it has a lot of different parameters under this in cloth shape, right? You got all these collision parameters. I can make it bouncier. Let's see what happens when I do that. So now it's going to stick and like bounce around a little bit more, right? I can turn down the friction on that, or the stickiness on that just a little bit more. Right, and I'm just going to get slightly different results. I can also play with thickness. Right now it's how thick is that fabric, right? Well, I can turn that down. I can make it seem a little thinner. And hopefully it'll simulate a little bit more like silk or something like that. Now, there's a lot of values under all of these. There's all these dynamic properties, just a lot of different stuff we can change down here. Stretch resistance, compression resistance, bend resistance. I can make this piece of fabric anything from silk to literally a piece of concrete. Right? Make it fall like it would dent, or it won't crumble, but it'll get like a chunk that'll knock into it. Right? Just by changing all of these presets. But that's just a lot of values to learn how to use them. And this is an intro class, right? I'm not gonna spend forever talking about that. What I want to show you is how to make this even more fun is right here under presets. If I click that preset button, I get a lot of options, right? I get burlap. So I can just replace that material with burlap settings. And now this thing should fall a little bit more like a heavier piece of burlap, right? And I'm going to turn my gravity up just a little bit. Let's set this to something like 25. And so now it's going to be a little bit more stiff and like rigid, right? Other presets in here, we have silk, which is going to be much lighter, much more crinkly, right? Crinkly, that's a word. So there is totally beach ball, there is airbag, and somebody noticed the lava option. Isn't that nice? What about honey? What's honey do? Yeah. So so I can replace it. Oh, that's messed it up. Tried to replace it with t-shirt mid simulation, right? So this is just fabric, right? And you can play around with this and get a lot of neat things happening, right? Well, the same object or the same system that simulates fabric also simulates particles. Right? So let's talk about that for a second. I'm going to go ahead and just do a new scene. Just going to hit stop. File, new scene. Again, I'm just going to do a plane. Scale that up. And I'm not even going to create anything yet. Actually, I'll create a little cylinder here. We'll use it in a minute. But right now, I'm going to... Actually, let's do a sphere, too. But what I am going to create is I'm going to go to N particles, and I'm going to create an emitter. So again, when I do this, watch what I get. I get an emitter 1, I get an M particle 1, and I get a nucleus node. So the emitter is just this object that is going to start spitting particles out into the air. Okay? The N particle 1 is the actual particles that are being emitted, and of course the nucleus node is like gravity and all that stuff, right? So let's look at the emitter first. Set this up to like 300. So as it's set right now, it's going to emit, let's see right here, 100 particles a second. Right? So it's just this little invisible object that's spitting out 100 points a second. Right? If I were to render these, you would get little bitty tiny dots that would render. We'll worry about how they render in a little bit later. You'll also see that the type of emitter right now is an omni emitter, which means it's just a sphere that's spitting them out in all directions. But since gravity is pulling them down, it immediately starts pulling them down. So I can change that. I can make this a directional emitter, and it's going to sort of spit them out in one direction. Right? So there's a lot of different things we can do here. I'm going to go ahead and set that back to that omni emitter again. but this is a nucleus. This is a nucleus object too, which means if I wanted these particles to interact with a piece of fabric, I could. I could have like a little fabric net that catches these particles and then it fills it up. Lots of different things we can do here. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to grab this in particle 1 and I'm going to go over here to shading and I'm going to change points to spheres so we can kind of see these a little bit better. Right? So now it's just spitting out all these spheres. Now, if I were to set my my length on this animation to 3000, right? First it seems okay. Little bits at a time, our scene's going to get slower and slower and slower in playback until eventually I probably crash Maya. Why is that?
You're building up somewhere.
Yeah, like it's spitting out 100 of these a second, and we're so far up to 700 frames, right? And they're living forever. Like they're just continuing to exist forever. I'm actually really surprised it's still playing as smoothly as it does. So we don't always want that. Sometimes we want those particles to just extinguish themselves, right? That's going to be in the emitter. So we go to the emitter, and you'll see that right now there's this, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it's under in particle, my bad. It's under lifespan, and right now it's set to live forever. I could change that to a constant rate to where they just live for 1 second.
I wish I had.
Right.
I'm dead for 1 second.
I could set it to a random range.
That's funny.
And if I did the random range, the lifespan is about a second with a random range of like 1 second. And that means some of them are going to live longer, some of them are going to live shorter than a second. And so we can just sort of play around with this. We can also play around with particle size. Right? I can make these objects much bigger, much smaller. And we can also make this stuff like change throughout time, right? If I wanted this, let's see, radius scale input, I could do it based off of its age. And basically, as these things get older, they'll change size and shape a little bit, right? So we can start just generating these particles that are spitting out, right? I'm going to change that lifespan thing a little bit. Just go ahead and let them live forever. Right? And I'm going to go ahead and select this plane. And under NCOF, I'm going to say Create Passive Collider. And let's watch what happens here. Not very realistic, right? And the reason for that is because they're just piling in there on top of each other, but that shape is never getting bigger, right? And the reason for that is because they're not actually colliding with themselves. Right? So there's a, under collision, right here, let's see. Crap, do I have that selected? In particle 1, collision, I can choose self-collide. And when I hit play now, they're going to kind of start to fill up this scene, right? Now, this is what we're going to do primarily with our cereal, right? We're going to fill up a cereal box with our cereal shape, right? And then after that, we're going to turn off this emitter when our cereal box is full, and then we're going to animate our cereal box picking up and pouring that cereal out. I'll be honest, I don't know if we can get all the way through that today now. Like I've kind of taken our time going through this. And you can see it's starting to slow down now. It's a lot of collisions happening, right? And so it's starting to sort of bog the computer down. Yeah, as they slowly start to trickle over there. Now, I want to show you one more thing that's actually kind of neat. So let's say I don't want this thing to just emit those spheres, right? Let's say I had something very specific I wanted it to emit, right? Like a piece of cereal, right? Whatever shape that is. Right? I can tell it to, instead of emitting spheres, emit instances of whatever mesh I want it to, right? So I have this cylinder here, right? I can even change this cylinder around a little bit. Maybe it's something like this, right? So we have this object. I'll scale it down, make it kind of smaller, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this. I think I got this order right. I select this object. I'm going to select N particle 1. And under N particles, I'm going to choose instancer. And I think that worked. The way we can tell is if we hit play now. Oh, sorry. If I go back to my N particle shape, I'm going to turn off my shading from spheres and just put that back to points. And so what it's going to do is it's just going to emit those little shapes over and over again. Okay? And this is what we're going to do with our serial. Now, to get rotation on those shapes is a little extra work. And so what I would do is we can create a piece of serial that is round or some variation of round. Maybe it's a little oblong or something like that. And then you can put whatever texture you want to on it. You can make it look like Cocoa Puff or whatever. And that way we don't have to worry about rotation as much. If you're wanting to worry about rotation, though, you just really want to use like the little Pac-Man ghost cereal or something like that. We can make them rotate. It's just a little more work. Okay, so right now, choose whatever cereal shape you've already modeled, and that'll be fine. What I'm going to try to get through in today's class is filling up our cereal box with our cereal. Okay, if we can get to that point, we're cool. If not, I'll hit pause and we'll pick back up where we are right now next class period, which, you know, that's all right. You can still be working toward getting to that point. So don't save. So I haven't made a bowl yet. I was going to show you my quick tutorial on making a bowl. Just going to create a sphere. Scale this down a little bit. So maybe something like that for our bowl. Right. And there's a couple of different ways we could do this. So one is I could actually just grab all of these faces and delete them. And that works, but it's a very ugly bowl, right? It's very thin. That doesn't make sense. So if I grab all of my faces, like I'm in face mode, I grab them all and I hit Control E for extrude and sort of push those outward. I have a bowl, right? So that was a pretty easy method of doing it. It's not really finished yet to me. Like I would still want to go in here with these vertices. I would probably grab some of these on the bottom and flatten those out. Maybe even use soft select a little bit to get a more interesting shape on this bowl. Whatever. This is a good start on my bowl. Before I do anything else, though, I'm going to go ahead and delete my history and freeze my transformations on this bowl. So I'm going to go Edit, Delete by Type, History, Modify, Freeze Transformations. So that works pretty well to be able to model something like that. And I'm going to go ahead and create a little cereal puff here. Maybe something like this. I know it's a sphere too, but by doing it this way, I can put whatever texture I want to on it. And so that means I can make something about that size, assign a new material. Again, I'm going to do AI standard surface. I like chocolate cereal. Let me make it. There we go. And I'm going to turn down all my reflections on that and maybe put a little bit of just a little bit of a bump noise on here. Maybe like fractal. There we go. So now I got me a little bitty serial piece. Something like that, right? Okay. So again, you can watch this. You can kind of go back and watch through the video to get up to that point. I don't think we're going to get all the way through this, but I may be able to get a version of this to where you could pick this up and kind of run with it. What I'm going to do is what we just did. I'm going to create an emitter. I'm going to allow it to emit particles into this box, right? And then I'm going to replace those particles with this instance of this serial. Right? And then once that box is full, I'm going to shut off the emitter. And then as long as it's colliding with that box, I can animate my box picking up and pouring out the serial. Let's see if it works. So under Effects, End Particles, Create Emitter. I'm going to go ahead and emit up here. And what's going to happen is it's going to start spitting particles into this box, but it's going to go through it, right? So all of the things that I want this to collide with, I want to turn into an emitter. I'm sorry, into a passive collider. I also want to pull this up off the ground just a little bit so it doesn't go through the floor. I don't want to be completely off the ground, but I want it to be up enough to where it doesn't collide with multiple objects at once. So we got this. I'm going to go to End Cloth, Create Passive Collider. And what should happen now is we should start seeing these little particles like not going through the table. So you can't really see them collecting in the box very well. Let's set this up to something higher. There we go. So we're starting to see them collect in the box a little bit, making some kind of weird shapes there. We'll talk about that here in a minute. I'm going to replace this emitter of these little particles, though, with this instance of the serial. Okay. So again, I'll call this my serial piece. Right. I'm going to select the serial piece, the M particle 1, and then I'm going to go to M particles instancer. And what we're going to get is this thing trying to fill up our box with serial, right?
I'm sorry, can you go back and do that again?
Yep. Just from the instancer part? Just the instancer part?
No, how'd you get the particles to go in the box?
Okay. Let's just do that. I want to delete all this stuff. So all I did is I created a particle emitter, which is under N particles, create emitter, right? And then you can move this emitter up here in the air so it will sort of like spit them out,
Gotcha.
right? Now the way they're colliding with the box is if I select the box and go to N cloth, I can make that a passive collider.
Okay, so I select the box.
Yep. N cloth, and that's passive collider.
Gotcha.
And so now what should be happening is those little pieces of serial, or those little pieces of particles, should be sticking to the box. I'm going to replace each of those particles with this piece of serial. So the way we do that is serial piece, and then I select the N particle 1. And then under N particle, I'll use instancer. So you need to do it in that order: serial piece, N particle 1, instancer. And so now it should be just filling up that box with these pieces of serial. Now, again, the problem with this is they're not colliding with each other, with themselves, right? And this is where this project can start to get a little messy. I've had plenty of exploding serial box projects, right? Because once they start colliding, they're going to go everywhere, and like trying to funnel them into that serial box is a little harder, right? so what I'm going to do in particle 1, under collisions, I'm going to go ahead and hit self-collide. Go ahead and hit play. There they go. They exploded. But then once it starts over, it's kind of going to get closer, right? You're going to see some of them falling out. Yeah, so it's filling up pretty quick. Now, here's the interesting thing. Even though they're colliding, if you look, they're not touching, right? So there's a couple of things happening here. It's using that instancer to replace what the particles look like, not how they simulate. Right? They're still simulating as an invisible point, right? And so if I want to see how big it thinks that invisible point is, under the in particle 1, this solver display, if I turn on collision thickness, you'll see that it puts this yellow shape over top of them, right? That yellow shape is how big it thinks the cereal is, even though our cereal is small. And I can change that size just by changing this collision width scale, right? And so I really just want to take this down till it's about the same size as my particle, or as my cereal ball, right? And at that point, I can always turn that back off so we don't have those yellow boxes everywhere. This object also has a solver display. And if I turn it on, collision thickness, you'll see that it's actually thicker than the cereal box. So again, I can turn that thickness down just a little bit too, till it's something a little more accurate. Maybe something like that, right? Turn that off. And hopefully what I get now is a little bit more of an accurate simulation. These cereals going into this box, right? Now, there's a couple of different ways we can handle this. Right now, we just want to show the animation of the cereal already in the box, picking it up, pouring it out, right? We don't need 500 frames of the cereal box filling up. And that's kind of the hard part, is getting to that point. So what we could do is we could let this cereal box fill up and not start animating the cereal box until like frame 500, right? So it starts filling up at frame 1 or whatever, and it fills up, and then we can animate it at frame 500, pouring the cereal out. Or we could actually start simulating this before frame 1. Right? So really, either of those work. It really just means that when you go to render, you would render either starting with frame 1 or starting with frame 500. Right? It really just depends on how you want to handle your own timeline. Right? But I want to go ahead and show you how we're going to turn this off. And I'll go ahead and show you how to pre-simulate this to where we can start it earlier if we would like. So I'm going to go to frame negative. So I type the little negative sign. Let's do negative 500. Right? And so now you'll see there's frame 0 right there in the middle. Right? And if I go way back here to negative 500 and hit play, nothing happens. Right? Actually, nothing happens until I get to frame 0, and then it'll start emitting. Right? And the reason for that is nucleus is set to start being active at frame 0. Right? So we can change that. If we scroll down, if we select the nucleus one, scroll down here to our time attributes, I can change my start frame to negative 500. And what's going to happen now is for those first negative 500 frames, I can fill up my cereal box, right? So let's say around frame negative 200, I'm like, that's enough cereal, right? Maybe we'll say negative 150. So we are going to set some keyframes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set keyframes on that number of frames that this thing is emitting per second, right? So remember on our emitter, we could change the number of frames being emitted a second, right? Right now it's 100. Right? And so starting with negative 500, it's going to emit 100 frames a second. Well, I could change that to 300 if I wanted to, right? And it's going to spit them out way faster and fill up our box way faster. Right? And let's say right about there is where I want it to stop. So I'm going to say about frame 300. I'm going to right click and keyframe to set a key. Okay. So from 500 to 300, it's emitting 300 particles a second. The very next frame, I'm going to set that to 0. And then right click and set key. So the interesting thing is anything in Maya that has a value, you can right click on it and set a keyframe. So we'll get to see what that looks like now. If I hit play, as soon as we get to frame negative 300, it's going to turn off that emitter. And then they're just going to settle in the box. Which means if I've done all this correctly, what I should be able to do now is starting with frame 1, I should be able to start animating my box picking up off the ground and pouring out the cereal. I'm going to take a quick stab at this. I guarantee you my cereal is going to go everywhere. So setting a keyframe on my box there, maybe by about frame 80, I've picked up the cereal. So it's leaving that behind because I'm not currently simulating, right? I'm just moving stuff on my timeline. So I'll do maybe something like that. I'll leave it about there for about 220 frames, maybe move it a little bit more. Bless you. And then I'm going to bring it back to its original starting point over the next 300 frames here. So let's see what we get. Oh, I know what we're going to get. That cereal is not a collider, is it? But let's see if it actually. There's a good chance that as soon as the cereal picks up, it just can fly everywhere.
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay, so it did that. Let's stop this for a second. There's a chance that why it did that, yeah. So my playback speed is still set to real time in this. And so that means it skipped a frame. And when it did, the cereal went from being inside of the box to outside of the box. So I'm going to do play every frame max real time. So I know this part isn't always the most exciting, waiting for the cereal box to fill up. Oh, and before I do that, let's go ahead and make these things passive colliders as well. So in cloth, create passive collider. Let's see what we get. Yeah, okay. Anyway, we're halfway there. Something's gonna happen soon. Y'all got any plans for summer vacation? Sweet.
Change the animation course.
Oh yeah, 2D.
Yes, before sword.
Okay, here it comes. Something's gonna happen. It's gonna work. It worked. Oh, it's beautiful. Actually, if this works, we're calling the Vatican, and I'm going to be a saint because this is like one of my first miracles here. No! Oh, it's almost
That's too much cereal. The milk to cereal ratio wouldn't work with that.
oh yeah, it's totally going to pour over when you pour milk in there. Right?
Like a lot of this.
So, I have never, in teaching this class, on the first try, poured all of the cereal into the bowl without spilling it. And if you pull it off too, like that'll be amazing. Because usually what's going to happen is one piece of cereal is going to go haywire and go bouncing across the table. And you're going to be like, dang it, I want to get it all in there. So do you adjust a keyframe? Do you adjust gravity? Do you adjust friction? What do you adjust to make that happen? When this happens, when you get this, yeah. So here's the thing. Maya is going to simulate this ever so slightly different every time we hit play, right? It's calculating all of these numbers, and literally if I changed anything, we would get a completely different simulation. Sometimes if I change a texture, we'll get a different simulation, which doesn't even make sense, right? So the fact that all of that made it in there is like a freaking Christmas miracle, right? So what we're going to do is we want it to always look like that. Like we want to save that. We want to be able to save that simulation. So in Maya, when you simulate something, saving it is called caching it. Not C-A-S-H, C-A-C-H-E, cache, right? Like the stuff that, you know, internet web pages save on you so they can sell you stuff, right? And what that's going to do is it's going to save a temporary file, or it's going to save a file in your project that says every time you play this back, play it this way, right? So caching is one of the last things you do after you've gotten all of your simulation looking correct. But let's go ahead and cache mine now and see what happens. So I'm going to select my mParticle 1. I'm going to go to in cache, create new cache for this in object. And what it's going to do is it's going to simulate it one more time, and it's going to save the location of every one of those pieces as a file inside of my Maya project, right? And that means it'll always play this way. One of the biggest issues that people have in this project is they forget to cache or they cache incorrectly, and then they try to render on the render farm. And what it is if Maya is on frame 20, the only reason it knows where all those particles are is because of frame 19, right? And if you cache it, it will just memorize where it is on all of those frames. And I can render frame 10 and frame 50 and frame 500, and they'll all be the same every time I render it. If I don't cache it, Maya is just going to take its best guess. And so what's going to happen is your serial is going to be like really jittery and flying around everywhere if you don't cache it out. So caching is an important part of this process. Let's see if it all makes it into the bowl on the cache. Sometimes it doesn't. I know, isn't it?
Where's the action music?
I don't know, somebody needs to hum. All right. Oh, it did it. So I think it's going to stay. Okay. Like, you all have no idea. I can tell you've like started doing this on yours. Like, it's enraging sometimes, right? And that's one of the things about physics or about simulation is it's really easy to get Maya to simulate something. It's really hard to get it to do it exactly the way that it is in your head, okay? And a lot of that is just messing with it. For this project, I am not going to, like, I don't care if it makes it all in the bowl or not. Like, if you scatter the cereal all across the table, whatever. Like, do it for a reason, not just because it's easier to scatter it all across the table. Like, maybe make it make sense to the scene. So I'm not going to require you to get it all into the bowl, right? However, consider trying it as a personal challenge to get all of the cereal in the bowl. Again, like I've been teaching this class for like 3 years now. That's the first time that's ever happened. Usually I give up by the end of class. So we made it through way better than I expected it to. I didn't think we were going to make it through the cereal part today. I know that it went fast, and I know very few of you are probably able to like follow along all the way to the end. But we have it in the video. I'll save the video. I'll upload that to YouTube, and I think we have a minute to spare. So thanks for listening. Have fun. I will be here Friday to help with any issues you're having, and we will kick into the STEAM part of this on Monday's class and be able to simulate the STEAM. So, all right, I'll see y'all.